Hi, this is Corey Franklin with Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. We're going to talk about 4 people tonight, and we're going to start out with William Staub, who died recently at the age of 96, and he invented something that's ubiquitous in our culture today. Here's Brian Williams from NBC News to tell you about it.
William Staub has died. He was famous for developing the modern treadmill. That means for all the folks who've ever sweated it out on one, he's the guy to blame. Of course, the truth is, we owe him a huge debt of thanks because his product made people more fit all over the world. He developed it in a factory workshop in New Jersey, understanding they had to be affordable. His early models were the first to come up with adjustable speeds and inclines. William Staub was 96 years old. His family reports he was on the treadmill as recently as 2 months before his death.
Well, we not only have William Staub to thank for the treadmill, but we also have him to thank for all those stupid videos of people getting on those treadmills or putting their pets on those treadmills and having them run too fast. Thanks for that, Mr. Staub. We're going to move on now to Tony Martin. Tony Martin died recently at the age of 98, and he could be considered the last of the big-time crooners. He was a nice Jewish boy from San Francisco. He was born Alvin Morris, and he started out in the 1930s. He was in the direct mold of all the famous crooners. From Bing Crosby to Frank Sinatra to Dick Haymes to Perry Como to Vic Damone, he was in that mold. Never as big a star as any of them, but a big star in his own right, especially in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. It was a different era. Most of these guys started out with big bands. Tony Martin started out with the big bands. He sang with Woody Herman for a while. He was a good-looking guy with a good physique, so they put him in movies. His movies were basically forgettable. The problem was he couldn't act very well, so he was in a lot of forgettable movies, including The Big Store with the Marx Brothers with Groucho. He started out at RKO. He moved to 20th Century Fox, and then he finally wound up at MGM. They were going to make him a star, but he just didn't have something, and he never made it as a star. While he was at 20th Century Fox, he met Alice Faye, and he married her, and they were one of Hollywood's primo couples in the late 30s and early 40s. But that marriage dissolved, and I'll talk a little bit about his remarriage to one of his stars from MGM in a little while. It's called the Butterscotch Baritone, and he sang a lot of stuff like this in his movies and in his post-movie career when he decided to make records primarily in the 1950s. This is the kind of singing that was popular with audiences after World War II, before rock and roll took hold. This is sort of pre-Elvis Presley music, and this is what was popular at the time. Singers concentrated on the standards, and here he is singing Jerome Kern.
Oh, are the promised kiss of springtime that makes the lonely winter sing on. You are the breathless hush of evening.
These crooners also sang songs from Broadway. This one is from Kismet. It was originally adapted from Borodin's Polovetzian Dances from Prince Igor. Tony Bennett had a big hit with this song about the same time that Tony Martin was singing it.
Take my hand, I'm a stranger in paradise, oh, lost in a wonderland, a stranger in paradise. If I stand starry-eyed, that's a danger in paradise.
As I said, Tony Bennett did a better job with that song. You don't think much about that singing today. It doesn't sound like much, but at the time, people really loved that sort of over-accentuated, drawn-out lyric singing. In fact, if you listen to Sinatra in that period when he went to Capitol in the mid-50s, you see how he started a style that was different from the singers like Tony Martin. Here's Tony Martin in a song that was considered risque at the time.
When we are dancing and you're dangerously near me, I get ideas, I want to hold you so much closer than I dare to. I want to scold you 'cause I care more than I care to. And when you touch me and there's fire in every finger, I get ideas,
Remember, while he's doing this, you got Elvis starting out with rock and roll, and you got Sinatra and the Capitol stuff, and you can see why this was going to die out in a little while. Meanwhile, after World War II, two new young songwriters, Livingston and Evans, who we've talked about before, were writing songs. We featured them with the Mr. Ed theme and with Buttons and Bows, and with the Bonanza theme. And here they wrote a million seller for Tony Martin.
The rose must remain with the sun and the rain, for its lovely promise won't come true. To each his own, to each his own, and my own is you.
With that record, he got a contract with RCA, but he was never able to duplicate that success again. However, while he was still at MGM, he married his second wife, and that's probably what he's best known for. His career was not going anywhere, but he married Cyd Charisse. Cyd Charisse, one of the great dancers of the 20th century. She was one of Fred Astaire's two great partners, along with Ginger Rogers. She was beautiful, she was long-legged, and she did a wonderful job opposite both Astaire and Gene Kelly in the movies. She married Tony Martin in 1948, and they were married until her death in 2008, so they were together for 60 years. It was one of the famous marriages in Hollywood. They were together so long that it was pretty much forgotten by the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. But their marriage was a big deal. They were a superstar couple in Hollywood. And even after Tony Martin's career was pretty much over, and even after Cyd Charisse's career was on the downslide, they were still a featured couple on a lot of television shows, including this Hollywood Palace episode in ABC in the mid-60s. And they still had a lot of star power.
You know, I've never seen you look more beautiful. No. And I'm not at all upset about the cost of all your new gowns.
Well, I do have to keep up appearances. After all, I am married to one of the best-dressed men in the world.
That's true. In the field of fashion, I cover the mainstream.
Both. Look for him on the cover of Field and Stream.
Thanks a lot. You see, that's what happens when you're married to a movie star.
That's your standard Hollywood palace of the 1960s, husband and wife, big star, Hollywood couple humor. And that's Tony Martin. He had a wonderful career. He had a long career. He probably outlived his fame, and we won't see his like again. He's one of the last of the big-time crooners. We're going to move on now to Gore Vidal, who died recently at the age of 86. Gore Vidal was a public intellectual. He was an author. He was a screenwriter. He actually did some acting. He wrote plays, and he was a witicist as well as hanging around with all the right people. His grandfather was a senator, and his father was an aviation expert in Washington in the 30s. So Gore learned at an early age the ins and outs of Washington, and that served him well his entire career.
One's character is mixed. I've always been interested in the political life of my country, and I come from a political family. That is all at hand for me. And then, living as I do in the culture, with open eyes, I see how funny it is. I see the comic aspects. And my instincts are satire.
You know, as a writer, I don't think he ever fulfilled his potential. He was probably overrated in the public. His best-known books were historical fiction. He wrote about Abraham Lincoln. He wrote about Aaron Burr. He wrote about the Roman Empire. He had a lot of historical detail in there, but none of his books were really, really top-rate. He wrote great magazine articles, but he was never able to actually apply that to his books. In terms of his screenwriting, when he was a collaborator, he was at his best. He collaborated on Ben-Hur. He got in a big fight with Charlton Heston after Ben-Hur. He claims that he inserted some homosexual subtext in there, which Charlton Heston denied. It was one of Gore Vidal's big fights. He also worked on the screenplay for Is Paris Burning, which was a good movie. But when he was on his own on screenplays, he generally turned out pretty bad stuff. He's best known for two of his own screenplays, Myron Breckenridge, which was really junk, and Caligula, which was even worse dreck. His only real notable long-form work was his play The Best Man, which was made into a 1964 movie with Henry Fonda. And that's an excellent movie about politics and politicians. But other than that, if you look at all his work, for a guy as intelligent and talented as he was, if you take away The Best Man and a lot of his magazine writing, You could sort of say he may have squandered his writing abilities. He was quite a raconteur. He'd go on television a lot. He'd get quoted by journalists a lot. He had a lot of good quotes. Among them, he once said, "The four most beautiful words in our common language are, 'I told you so.'" He said, "It is not enough to succeed. Others must fail." He said, "The United States was founded by the brightest people in the country, and we haven't seen them since." And he said, "Don't have children, have grandchildren." So he was sort of a poor man's Oscar Wilde. But he's best known for his feuds. Gore Vidal was a big liberal, very, very passionate liberal, but that didn't prevent him from fighting with everybody. He fought with conservatives and he fought with liberals. I said he fought with Charlton Heston, he fought with Truman Capote, but his two best-known fights were with Norman Mailer and William Buckley. With Norman Mailer, who was a liberal also, he fought on the Dick Cavett Show in 1971, and here is their fight, and it was broken up by Janet Flanner, who was a friend of Hemingway's, and Cavett got in there to pull him apart also. Norman Mailer was a writer, and he used to like to fight with everybody. He had a couple of physical fights too, so when he and Gore Vidal got together, you know there was going to be a fight between them. And as Janet Flanner notes, it's basically self-indulgent about nothing. Vidal is the one speaking first. He's answered by Mailer.
The good thing about him is its constant metamorphosis. He does re-bear himself like the phoenix, and what the next incarnation will be, I don't know.
Well, you seem to have me figured out as the next reincarnation for me is going to be Charles Manson.
Well, you let yourself...
Why don't you read what you wrote?
You let yourself in for it, and I will tell you, I'll give a little background here, that Mailer has
We all know that I stabbed my wife years ago. We do know that, Gore. You were playing on that. Now,
I'm not to forget about it. Listen,
well, no, you don't want to forget about it. You're a liar and a hypocrite. You were playing on it.
But that wasn't a liar and a hypocrite. I wasn't going to talk about it.
The fact of the matter is that people who read the New York Review of Books know perfectly well. They know all about it. And it's your subtle little way of doing it. You know, the New Yorker was...
Oh, I'm beginning to see what bothers you now. Okay, I'm getting the point.
Are you ready to apologize?
I would apologize if it hurts your feelings. Of course I would.
No, it hurts my sense of intellectual pollution.
Well, I must say, as an expert, you should know about that.
I would like to... Yes, well, I've had to smell your works from time to time, and that has helped me to become an expert on intellectual pollution, yes.
Yeah, well... I was going to say, I was not going to...
Men insult each other, not only in public, but you act as if you were in private. That's the odd way.
It's the art of television, isn't it?
It's very odd that you act as if you were the only people here.
Aren't we?
They are here. He's here. I'm here. And I'm becoming very, very bored.
Here's your standard New York hissy, intellectual hissy fit. But the real main event for Gore Vidal, the thing that put him on the map, and one of the most compelling bits of television in history, was his argument with William Buckley during the Democratic National Convention in 1968. I have a little first-hand knowledge of that. One of my good friends was one of Gore Vidal's pages. He actually asked us to come down there to see it, and we didn't do it. This was in the midst of all the rioting during the Democratic National Convention, when the police were beating up on rioters in Grant Park, and there was a lot of anti-war demonstration going on in the midst of the convention. You don't have that kind of excitement today, but there was a fervor in the air, there was an ardor going on, and you got William Buckley, who was the leading conservative at the time, and Gore Vidal, a big liberal, arguing about the anti-war protesters, and you get some great name-calling and some great television between Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley, still compelling even today.
You must realize what some of the political issues are here, that many people in the United States happen to believe that the United States policy is wrong in Vietnam, and the Viet Cong are correct in wanting to organize their country in their own way politically. This happens to be pretty much the opinion of Western Europe and many other parts of the world. If it is a novelty in Chicago, that is too bad, but I assume that the point of the American democracy is you can express any point of view you want. Shut up a minute.
No, I won't. And some people were pro-Nazi, and the answer is that they were well treated by people who ostracized them, and I'm for ostracizing people who egg on other people to shoot American Marines and American soldiers. I know you don't care.
As far as I'm concerned, the only sort of pro-crypto-Nazi I can think of is yourself. Failing that, I would only say that we can't have.
Now listen, you
the right of
stop
assembly
calling me a crypto-Nazi.
Let's stop
or
calling names.
you in your goddamn face, and you'll stay plastered.
Gentlemen, let's go.
Let the author of Myra Breckenridge go back to his pornography and stop making any illusions of Nazism to somebody who was in the infantry in the last war.
You were not in the infantry, as a matter of fact. You didn't fight in the war. You were not.
Crypto-Nazis, queers, sock you in the jaw, you'll stay plastered. You don't get television like that today. That was really something, and to think I passed up a chance to be in the studio. In any event, that was Gore Vidal. Later in life, he sort of got a little crazy. He went into a bunch of conspiracy theories. Pretty much had a conspiracy theory for all our major events of the 20th century. He had a Pearl Harbor conspiracy theory. He had a Kennedy assassination conspiracy theory. He had a 9/11 conspiracy. So Gore sort of went a little funny in the head there. When you start out like Gore Vidal as a feisty character to begin with, it makes for sort of a colorful character in his old age. Here's one of his interviews later in life.
In the very first page of your new memoir, you say that you are heading towards life's door marked exit, hopefully graciously. I mean, of all the things you've accomplished, all the people that you've met, all the things you've done, what do you want to be remembered for?
Not at all.
That can't be. I mean,
anyone who wants to be remembered is doomed not to be remembered.
Well, that's Gore Vidal, public intellectual, and like Tony Martin, we'll probably never see his likes again. We're going to close tonight with Joe Walsh. Not the Eagles guitarist, but the Harvard baseball coach who died recently at the age of 58. Joe Walsh was a nice Irish boy from South Boston, and he coached Harvard for 16 years and won 5 Ivy League titles. He was well liked among all baseball people, both amateur and professional, and he owns a small part in baseball history. The oldest major league stadium is Fenway Park, and they celebrated their 100th anniversary this year. The first game played at Fenway Park was between the Boston Red Sox and the Harvard Crimson, a college professional game played on April 9th, 1912. This year, for the 100th anniversary of Fenway Park, the Harvard Crimson traveled from Cambridge and took batting practice at Fenway Park on the anniversary of the first game, and that was the brainchild of Joe Walsh. He gives an interview here, and this is one of the last public interviews that he gave in his last season before he died this summer.
I wasn't here for that day, but I'm really glad to be here today. This is a special day for Harvard, for sure. And just being a part of the history with the Red Sox back in 1912, our program goes way back too. And just feeling that today, coming over the bus, I was talking to the guys a little bit about the first bat I ever hit at Fenway. And there's just so much history in both places. And somebody mentioned to me today, coming over here, you got the dream job, being a coach at Harvard and going to Fenway for BP, and they're right. And I know my team is real excited, not just the guys from Boston, but the guys from all over that we have at Harvard. And Fenway Park it's universal. You mentioned baseball, you say Fenway Park, it's one and the same. When we have the Beanpot here, standing at home plate, when the national anthem and looking out, it's just an incredible feeling, and I still get that great feeling when I'm driving by and I see the Citgo sign with the green monster. And whenever we have a recruit at Harvard, we love to bring up the fact that, hey, we're right near Fenway Park and we play here, and you could just see the look in their eyes. You do Fenway Park, you know? So things are just unbelievable.
That's a Boston accent. Joe Walsh, a very nice guy. I had the pleasure to meet him a couple of times. He's an old school baseball guy. And like Tony Martin and Gore Vidal, I don't think we'll see his like again. Well, we're going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer, Cyd Charisse. And as a final tribute to Joe Walsh, I'm going to play a baseball song about a coach and a player. So here is John Fogerty with a little bit of center field.